One of the trades you made while you were with Boston was moving a good young forward in Tyler Seguin. The Oilers have lots of good young franchise-type forwards too. As you sit there today, how do you feel about that trade, and how does that experience maybe affect what you might do with some of these young crop of good forwards you have?
I've actually made a few trades of good young forwards, so that's something that I won't shy away from.
When the Edmonton Oilers hired Peter Chiarelli as GM and President of Hockey Operations, it was expected that he would help develop and lead the team to contender status. Through 9 years with the Boston Bruins, Chiarelli helped the team to 2 Stanley Cup final appearances with 1 championship and a President's Trophy to boot, but hidden behind the hardware were reasons for concern. As his years went by in Boston, criticisms arose highlighting lopsided trades and salary cap mismanagement. But for the Oilers, he was the biggest fish on the market. In the eyes of many, he was the obvious choice removed from Edmonton's decade-plus of boys club management. What could go wrong?
Было намного лучше, но на этот раз как-то не удалось. Во-первых, народу мама, музыка не очень. А что за направление? А? Что за направление? Направление? Какое направление? Что за направление музыки играет там?
In today's video, we revisit Peter Chiarelli's 4-year stint with the Edmonton Oilers, analyzing his trades, signings, draft selections, and more.
We have to play at a higher pace, and that pace isn't necessarily speed. I think you've heard us talk about that before, thinking more quickly, moving the puck through all 3 zones more quickly.
As is the case with most GMs, Chiarelli's first major decision came in signing Todd McLellan as the team's head coach. McLellan was an obvious choice, so it's hard to fault anyone here. Another no-brainer came at the 2015 NHL Draft, where with the first overall pick, Chiarelli had the privilege of making NHL history.
The Edmonton Oilers would like to select with their first pick from the Erie Otters, Connor McDavid.
With all the hoopla that surrounds Connor McDavid, it might be easy for some to forget about another notable transaction from this year's draft in Florida, that being the acquisition of a former Edmonton Oil King captain.
Edmonton trades picks number 16 and 33 to the New York Islanders in exchange for Griffin Reinhart.
With that first-round selection, the New York Islanders selected Matthew Barzal, while Reinhart would play only 29 more games in the NHL. On day 2 of that draft, Chiarelli also traded a 2nd and 3rd round pick for the up-and-coming services of Cam Talbot, turning to free agency, where the Oilers signed Andre Sekera to a 6-year, $33 million contract, which was especially tough considering his injuries down the road. Meanwhile, Mark Letestu was inked to a 3-year deal, and Justin Schultz was re-upped for 1 year. As the Oilers entered their McDavid era, Chiarelli kept a modest approach during his first season. In December, Ben Scrivens was flipped for Zach Kassian. Come January, Cam Talbot was extended for 3 years at $12.5 million, and in February of 2016, the Oilers traded Justin Schultz to Pittsburgh for a 3rd round pick. While the return was far from ideal, especially considering what the Pens would achieve with Schultz, at the time of the trade, Justin was having a nightmare season. His value was low, and he was on an expiring contract, so the Oilers didn't really have much for leverage. That February, Chiarelli also made 2 other moves, with a retained Patrick Maroon highlighting their acquisitions. So his first season comes to a close, with the Oilers finishing 2nd last in the NHL as the team pulled the 4th overall selection in the 2016 draft. With that pick, the Oilers took Jesse Puljujarvi, who developed into a considerable disappointment, and to top things off, Vincent Desharnais was their only other significant pick, coming all the way in round 7. 4 days following those picks, Chiarelli made a massive deal in trading Taylor Hall to the New Jersey Devils, with Adam Larson coming back to the Oil. This trade was heavily ridiculed and is a total head-scratcher to this day, though it's not that Larson was a bad Oiler. But Taylor Hall was on another level with potential star status. What has come of his injury-plagued career maybe takes some sting out of the wound. Still, that 2017-18 MVP season definitely hurt. Turning to free agency, Chiarelli looked to a familiar face in an attempt to bring scoring pedigree and additional size to the Oilers lineup. On July 1st of 2016, the Oilers signed Milan Lucic to a 7-year, $42 million deal, and this one was pretty questionable from the start. Personally, I'd give Chiarelli a teeny little bit of slack because I don't think anyone was expecting Lucic to fall off as quickly as he did. But regardless, regression was seen as an inevitable consequence of this signing.
Anytime you give anyone a 7-year deal, maybe there's risk involved. Do you feel like totally calculated and confident with the level of that you're stepping out there with a couple of these moves, big moves this week?
Well, there's risk involved in every decision you make. He's 28. He's very limited injuries, if anything. And yes, the way he plays, it's a little more difficult to play that into your 30s. But I mean, I've seen him grow as a physically and mentally as a young man. I know what care he takes of his body. I know what his wife. She's very into nutrition, as Milan has become into nutrition. He was always one of the best conditioned athletes on the Bruins, so that stuff mitigates the risk. But you know, there's risks. Yep, there's risks.
Moving on, Chiarelli continued his offseason with minor moves around the edges, though he did sign Chris Russell to a 1-year deal just days before the season kicked off, while also waving farewell to Nail Yakupov. 2016-17 was a hell of a year for the Oilers. McDavid was healthy and scored 100 points. Draisaitl had his breakout season with 77 points. Cam Talbot played 72 games with some pretty impressive numbers, and Pat Maroon almost scored 30 goals. All of those factors and more led the Oilers to a second-place finish in the Pacific Division, highlighting their first playoff berth since 2006. In their first-round matchup against the San Jose Sharks, Edmonton prevailed in 6 games thanks to decent goaltending and clutch scoring. Then came an absolutely magnificent series against the Anaheim Ducks. Pat Maroon scored the game winner against his former team in Game 2. The Ducks crawled back from a 2-0 series deficit, winning Games 3 through 5 with 2 overtime winners. Edmonton made a statement with a 7-1 win in Game 6, but Anaheim would lock it up in 7 with a conservative 2-1 victory. Moving forward, 1 day prior to the 2017 NHL Draft, the Oilers made a splash in trading Jordan Eberle for Ryan Strome. Eberle was fresh from just 2 points through 13 playoff games, cementing his status in the doghouse. Strome was meanwhile labeled as a two-way up-and-comer, though his defensive value was a tad inflated. At the 2017 draft, the Oilers took Kailer Yamamoto with their first-round selection, which definitely stirs some element of regrets, but they did get Stuart Skinner in round 3 before whiffing on the rest of their picks. Free agency brought more movement around the edges, though Chiarelli wasn't exactly signing high-ceiling players. That offseason, the Oilers also extended Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl to their first big tickets as we enter the 2017-18 season. With heightened expectations, this season did not go according to plan for the Oilers. Milan Lucic and Patrick Maroon both took steps back, Ryan Strome did not make up for the loss of Jordan Eberle, and Cam Talbot started to struggle. As a result, the Oilers finished the season with a 36-40-5 record, wasting a 108-point campaign from Connor McDavid. Outside of a few minor deals, Chiarelli and his management team were pretty quiet through this season. After the Oilers season came to a close, however, Mikko Koskinen was signed to an experimental 1-year deal. Drake Caggiula signed a 2-year extension, and Matt Benning was also extended for 2 years at the price of $3.8 million. Jumping to the 2018 draft, where the Oilers made efficient use of only 5 total picks. Evan Bouchard was taken in the first round, Ryan McLeod was taken in round 2, and Michael Kesselring was selected all the way in round 6. Come July 1st, the Oilers made a number of depth signings highlighted by Kyle Brodziak and Tobias Rieder. Chiarelli also opted to re-sign Ryan Strome at $6.2 million over 2 years, while later giving Darnell Nurse a similar contract. To top things off, Alex Chiasson and Jason Garrison were also given one-year deals just prior to the 2018-19 regular season. After the team's previous campaign, Chiarelli's decisions entering this season stir some significant judgment. Secondary scoring was close to non-existent in 2017-18, and he didn't really do anything to address that. The Oilers had a mediocre start to that season, as Ryan Strome scored only 2 points in his first 18 contests. Consequently, he was quickly shipped to the New York Rangers in exchange for Ryan Spooner. Strome quickly bounced back, while Spooner would score only 3 points through 25 games with the Oilers that season. Days after that trade, the Oilers also fired their head coach Todd McLellan, replacing him with Ken Hitchcock. As the team continued to struggle into December, Chiarelli traded Jason Garrison and Drake Caggiula for Brandon Manning, and on that same day, Alex Petrovic was acquired for Chris Weidman and a third-round pick. Then came Chiarelli's final significant decision. On January 21st of 2019, 30-year-old Mikko Koskinen was signed to a 3-year, $13.5 million contract. At that point, Koskinen was 14-10-1 through 27 games with the Oilers, with a .278 and a .911 save percentage. The contract also included a 15-team no-trade clause active through the entirety of its duration. Not even 2 days following the announcement of that deal, Chiarelli was relieved of his duties. Wrapping up our video with a verdict of sorts, let's start with some positives. Chiarelli and his scouting staff made some valuable draft selections that are helping the Oilers to this day. That's not to say that his tenure brought a drafting masterclass, but Evan Bouchard and Stuart Skinner are valuable pieces in 2024. Talking trades, Chiarelli did see significant benefits on a number of moves, highlighted in the initial acquisitions of Cam Talbot, Zach Kassian, and Pat Maroon. I also think Chiarelli deserves credit for locking up McDavid and Draisaitl in 2017. Signing both players to long-term deals was an obvious decision, but that Leon contract was a pretty impressive piece of work. Outside of these mentions, though, it's hard to give him praise. When it comes to trades and signings, all of Chiarelli's biggest deals were flops. Signing Milan Lucic was a short-sighted decision. The price paid on Griffin Reinhart was egregious, and the returns on Taylor Hall, Jordan Eberle, and arguably Justin Schultz were not enough. Chiarelli also repeatedly overpaid on contracts, strapping the Oilers against the cap and blocking the team from acquiring real impact players. Taking a step back, I think Chiarelli had poor taste and talent and failed to recognize the evolving identity of the Edmonton Oilers. During his tenure, the team repeatedly acquired and extended aging physical players, failing to recognize the need for speed in their lineup. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to assess that, but Chiarelli doubled down on where he had success in Boston, and it ultimately led to his demise in Edmonton. For What's Happening Hockey, I'm Tate Laycraft.